Problematizing Iqbal as a state ideologue is the caption or the title of this chapter, and there would be some Pakistani context to this lecture because Iqbal is fairly central so far as the ideology of Pakistan is concerned, and much of the legitimacy for Pakistan as a nation state has been drawn from the ideas and poetry of Iqbal. So it's critical analysis of Iqbal's ideas. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the personality and the centrality of personality in the historical discourse that is quite prevalent in Pakistan. So personality is indeed central to the state-driven discourse of history in Pakistan. For instance, the main events featured in government-sponsored textbooks are descriptions of battles, mostly resulting in victory for the Muslim warrior on horseback. However, the personalities around whom the whole discourse of Pakistani Muslim nationalism is woven in history or Pakistan studies textbooks are not warriors. One of these personalities is Sheikh Ahmad Sahindi, popularly known as Mujaddid al-Ifsani, the reviver of the second millennium, who was the disciple of Khaja Baqi Billah, a renowned Sufi of the Naqshbandiya order, and the contemporary of Mughal Emperor Akbar and Jahangir. Ahmad Sahindi was the progenitor of Wahdatul Shahud and is considered to be the originator of the two-nation theory by Pakistani textbook authors. Shah Waliullah, another important figure in the context of the two-nation theory, was born in 1703 in Delhi, 4 years before the death of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. His father, Shah Abdul Rahim, had been a renowned religious scholar who also assisted in the compilation of Fatawa-e-Alamgiri, a book on jurisprudence prepared on the demand of Alamgir. Shah Waliullah believed that a previously existing purified form of Islam had become polluted due to Muslims intermingling with non-Muslim communities, especially Hindus on the subcontinent. Hence, he struggled to revive Islam on both an academic and political level until his death in 1762. Sayyid Ahmad Khan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Muhammad Iqbal are also hailed as chief architects of Pakistani nationalism anchored in the two-nation theory. Barring Iqbal, who was a creative genius par excellence, the others can be described as reformers or politicians exhibiting a scholarly streak. Even Jinnah, although undoubtedly ranked among the top politicians of the subcontinent, being taller than most of his contemporaries, had no scholarly pretensions. Yet, whatever the differences in their orientation, approach and modus operandi, the common denominator shared by all of them and underscored in Pakistani historiography is the notion of personality embodying, so to speak, the Hegelian world spirit, which supposedly enabled them to act decisively, thereby facilitating the unfolding of the course of history. Set against this ideological background, an attempt has been made in this lecture to disengage with this personality cult and the decisive role ascribed to it in Pakistani historiography in the latest construction of Pakistani nationalism. And doing so, the context in which the apotheosis of the personality of Iqbal was orchestrated will be explicated in further detail. At the outset, the following needs to be stated briefly. Despite the fact that Iqbal died almost a decade before Pakistan came into existence in 1947, The reverence accorded to him in the media and textbooks is matched only by Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. Iqbal's services for bringing freedom to the Muslims of the subcontinent are lauded beyond measure. Although the quest for a separate state got underway only in the wake of the Lahore Resolution in March 1940, a couple of years after Iqbal's demise. Furthermore, his poetic and philosophical, or rather scholastic articulations and their selective employment for the advancement of particular interest groups will also be discussed. So Iqbal's emphasis on dynamism as the fundamental trait of the spirit of Muslim culture, conspicuously absent from Pakistani educational discourse, will also be given due attention. Interestingly enough, Iqbal's notion of serial time and its linear progression conjures into existence historicism, whose Eurocentric specificity calls for a critical appraisal. However, before unraveling the intricacies and ambivalences emanating from interpretations of Iqbal's vision regarding the necessity of the Muslim state and its raison d'etre, it would be worthwhile to elucidate the epistemic context in which his thought found its origin. Iqbal is virtually omnipresent in the intellectual milieu of present-day Pakistan. His Urdu poetry is the poetry most recited and referred to in the public discourse. Along with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Iqbal is the personality most written about in Pakistan. Not only have some institutions been set up to stimulate and foster research on various dimensions of his multifaceted personality and multi-layered thought, but also a separate discipline by the name of Iqbaliyat or Iqbal Studies has been instituted in some of the country's leading universities. He is quoted by religious figures as well as by proponents of secularism, as S.M. Ikram, a famous scholar of Muslim history in the subcontinent, aptly underscores. Iqbal was a product of conflicting forces, and advanced Muslim socialists as well as reactionaries of the deepest dye can find verses in his works to support the conflicting ideologies. Iqbal is indeed a towering figure, and the hyper-real treatment has made him look even bigger. Yet, before proceeding further, it seemed pertinent to shed light on Iqbal's early life and his evolution as a poet. So far as his biographical persona is concerned, born in 1877 in Sialkot to a Kashmiri family of meager means, he was from Sapro-Brahmin caste. He received his early education in his native town and then proceeded to complete his bachelor's and master degrees in philosophy at Government College Lahore, where he came under the tutelage of Thomas Arnold, knighted in 1921. That was Thomas Arnold, who was knighted in 1921. He had shifted to Government College Lahore from Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, MU College Aligarh, and that is about Thomas Arnold. He taught at MU College Aligarh, and later on he came to Government College. It was at the behest of Arnold that Iqbal went to Cambridge and subsequently to Germany for a PhD degree at Munich University. Immediately after completing his master's in philosophy, he was employed as a staff member of Government College. However, most of his time and energy was invested in pursuit of literary activities. Soon he started contributing to an Urdu literary journal, Maqsan, which provided a literary platform for so many aspiring writers and poets. Iqbal also began to read longish poems at the annual gatherings of Anjuman-e-Himayat-e-Islam, which was a literary body for the Muslims, with Lahore as its epicenter. In the first phase of the poetry writing, which ended in 1905. Iqbal composed such poems like Tasawwur-e-Dard, Picture of Grief, Naya Shiwala, The New Temple, and Trana-e-Hindi, the Indian anthem, all of which were recited at the Anjuman's annual gatherings. As the titles of these poems suggest, Iqbal's infatuation with nationalism and pantheism, or Wahdatul Wujud, lasted until 1905. The year he departed for higher studies to England. Few of the poems composed in England bear testimony to the poetic tradition of Wordsworth, Coleridge, and William Cowper, which Iqbal seems to have imbibed during his 3 years stay. In Pakistan, this phase of Iqbal's evolution as a poet has been subjected to razor-sharp analysis by state ideology. Notwithstanding his enriching European experience, Iqbal returned to India in 1908 as a pan-Islamist and almost a Puritan. S.M. Ikram contends that Iqbal's researches into the history of Islamic mysticism, while working on his Munich thesis, The Development of Metaphysics in Persia, led him to conclude that Tasawwuf, or mysticism, had no solid historical foundation in original Islam. He was also in communication with his friend Khaja Hasan Nizami of Delhi, soliciting from him some convincing proof for the theory that Tasawwuf was an esoteric form of Islam. Consequently, he came to believe Tasawwuf to be nothing but an alien and even an unhealthy growth. His long Persian poem, Israr-e-Khudi, or Secrets of the Self, which were published in 1915, epitomized that trend, condemning Tasawwuf, or Islamic mysticism, as effete and enervating. However, his more famous poems were Shikwa, the Complaint, Shama-o-Shair, Candle and the Poet, and Jawab-e-Shikwa, Reply to the Complaint, which lamented the prevalent state of Muslims as lacking in social status, economic sources, and religious spirit. After his return from Europe, he was influenced quite profoundly by Abul Kalam Azad, the editor of Al-Hilal, the religious scholar and historian Shibli Nomani, the poet and stylist Akbar al-Habadi, and Shibli's religious disciple Sayyid Suleiman Nadwi. The original version of Jawab-e-Shikwa strongly reverberated Al-Hilal's attitude in a situation which was not favorable to the tradition of the Muslims on the subcontinent. Despite Iqbal's unequivocal advocacy of pan-Islamism and opposition to Islamic mysticism, designating him a Muslim separatist is undoubtedly an overstatement. Iqbal's attitude had at best been ambivalent towards other communities, yet Iqbal's preoccupation with pan-Islamism lasted until the end of his life and can thus be regarded as a lasting influence on his poetry. एक हो मुस्लिम हरम की पासबानी के लिए नील के साहिल से लेके ताबे खाके काशगर, that verse epitomizes the thought, which was essentially pan-Islamist. It had a very tangible ring of pan-Islamism to it. So we can see the departure of Iqbal from nationalistic to the pan-Islamist, to the pan-Islamist direction. So, unequivocal loyalty to the British is yet another aspect of Iqbal. Although he trenchantly castigated Western concepts and notions like nationalism and even democracy, he was nonetheless enamored with the British colonial government in India. The first portable instance in this regard was Iqbal's requiem on the eve of Queen Victoria's death, in which he called the deceased Khuda ka Saya, or shadow of God. Recently, a weekly Taqaze has published a detailed account of Iqbal's pro-British leanings, in which it is stated that according to Iqbal, such government is the blessing of Allah that ensures peace and tranquility for its subjects, so it must be valued. A similar opinion was expressed by Iqbal on the occasion of King George V's visit to Lahore, where his coronation ceremony, or Rasm-e-Taj Poshi, was reenacted, ironically, in the Grand Badshahi Mosque. Iqbal, who had also participated in the ceremony, had issued the following statement: "An ideal for the Muslims is not the building of an empire, but the spreading of their deen. Islam is a complete code of life." And the British government willingly permits them. In 1918, when the First World War was about to come full circle, a meeting was held in the town hall of Lahore, chaired by Sir Michael O'Dwyer, the Lieutenant General Governor of the Punjab. In this public meeting, Iqbal recited a poem entitled Punjab Ka Jawab, Punjab's Reply, which was meant to persuade the Muslims of Punjab to lend unequivocal support to the British government in the war effort. Furthermore, on the occasion of the Silver Jubilee of the King of England, Herbert William Emerson, the Governor of Punjab, had instituted a fund called Silver Jubilee Fund, to which Iqbal contributed 100 rupees. This pro-colonialist dimension of Iqbal is mentioned neither in books published in state-sponsored institutes, nor in the Urdu print media, in order to promote Pakistani nationalism by instrumentalizing Iqbal. Objectivity is being sacrificed at the altar of expediency. Iqbal, the upholder of tradition, is yet another dimension which must be looked at in an incisive manner. Among the multiple responses of South Asian Muslims to the political downfall of the Mughals, one particular response was that of Iqbal, who was confronted with the following scenario at the turn of the century. The Muslim Renaissance represented the point of commonality among the proponents of the reform movements which sprang up in the last quarter of the 19th century. Scriptural Islam of Deoband and Ahl Hadith, with text as its centrality, was the center. Centrality of text was emphasized as against orality. Devotional Islam of the Brahmins, spearheaded by Ahmad Raza Khan, and modernist Islam, whose main exponent was Sayyid Ahmad Khan, had their own recipes for bringing about a complete world-force among South Asian Muslims. In addition to these trends, the movement of pan-Islamism propounded by non-Indian Muslim Jamaluddin Afghani had also drawn substantial support from Indian Muslims. The Deobandi version of Islam laid emphasis on adherence to the scriptures, namely the Quran, Hadith, and Fiqh. Hadith is the tradition of the Prophet, and Fiqh is jurisprudence. For guidance in the literal sense, the Ahl Hadith denomination, inspired by the teaching of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, laid strong emphasis on the Quran and Hadith as sources of knowledge, casting aside Fiqh as a superfluous branch of knowledge. Quite contrary to the literalist version, devotional Islam, epitomized in the Brahmi denomination, allowed the local influences and cultural practices to be part of religious belief, thereby making it amenable to the Indian native populace. Eclectic Sufi thought was central to the Brahmi variant of South Asian Islam. Both these movements were antithetical to modernist tendencies which derived their inspiration from the Western tradition of rationality. However, they had nonetheless also imbibed certain influences from modernity, reflected quite substantially in Darul Uloom Deoband and the Madrasa of Brahmi. Still, adherence to the religious doctrine, strongly embedded in the tradition of history, of Islamic epistemology remained their core reference point, which was doggedly professed and preached by the ulama of these seminaries. Nevertheless, one must not lose sight of the fact that Amir College Aligarh, established by Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, prioritized modernity over tradition in quite unequivocal terms. Sayyid Ahmad Khan saw in the replication of Western institutions, including academic as well as intellectual traditions of modernity, on the subcontinent, the potential for a possible bailout of South Asian Muslims. He strove very hard through both pen and word of mouth to dispel Muslim misgivings against the British in a bid to bring both of them together. To Sayyid Ahmad Khan, the British, being Christians, were the holders of the book. Therefore, Muslims had no reason to distance themselves from them. Jamaluddin Akwani, the exponent of Pan-Islamism, was an implacable opponent of Sayyid Ahmad Khan and his extreme rationalism, and regarded his new Ilmul Kalam or scholastic sciences as nothing short of heresy. Yet, despite this fundamental antagonism, these two opponents shared one common conviction, namely, both believe Islam to be capable of an evolutionary process within the present and future history of mankind and in accord with it. Although Iqbal had tried with scholarly zeal to strike a balance between the two strands, which diverged to some extent in their prescriptions for the revival of Islam, his analysis and prognosis of the sliding fortunes of the beleaguered Muslims was nonetheless imbued with a strong rationalist reflection. The careful perusal of the reconstruction of religious thought in Islam and of Iqbal's poetry, however, also reveals very strong imprints of Pan-Islamism in his scholastic formulations. In his analysis of Muslim decline, he introduced the thoughts of Fakhruddin al-Iraqi, Jalaluddin Rumi, and other luminaries of medieval Perso-Arabic background in order to underpin his own scholastic thoughts, and then tried to weld them together with Western philosophical traditions. This is probably the reason why Pakistani scholar Ali Abbas Jalalpuri called him a mutakallim, or scholastic, instead of a philosopher. Contrary to Jalalpuri's assessment, the Pakistani state presents Iqbal as a poet-philosopher. Apart from the instrument of rationality that he employed, not unlike Sayyid Ahmad Khan, to appraise the state of contemporary Muslims, Iqbal did not overlook Jamaluddin Akwani either. On the one hand, he lamented the deplorable plight of the Indian Muslims, and on the other hand, the whole Muslim community, Ummah, was his reference point, thus partaking in Pan-Islamism of Jamaluddin Akwani. With the aid of modernist tools of analysis, he aimed to understand the value of tradition that did not correspond to the reigning political and social dispensation, with the primary aim of rejuvenating it. In this respect, Sayyid Ahmad Khan and Iqbal were both mutakallimin, or scholastics, and upholders of tradition. Thus, branding both of them as modernists seems a misnomer. Iqbal, of course, stands out in solitary splendor vis-a-vis his predecessors and contemporaries alike, because he employed a modern philosophical idiom and problematized the condition of Muslims in the light of Whitehead, Kant, Hegel, and Nietzsche. Such is the problematic constellation that exists on the very margins of the epistemology that is orchestrated by the Pakistani state. So then we move on to the misplaced emphasis on Iqbal's contribution to politics. In Pakistan, Iqbal's preeminence rests, apart from his poetry and the contributions he supposedly made in the realm of politics, which unfortunately was not his field of expertise, to say the least. And much famed political biography of Iqbal by Ashiq Hussain Batalvi, Iqbal ke aakhri 2 saal, the last 2 years of Iqbal. Batalvi talks much more about Iqbal's contemporary and one-time close friend at Government College Lahore, Sir Fazl Hussain, and the evolution of the Unionist Party, of whom later was the founder. Ironically, in the book whose title explicitly carries the name of Iqbal, this national hero does not really figure very prominently, and scarcely anything is mentioned about his contribution as a politician. While giving a detailed description of the political circumstances in Punjab in the 1920s and 1930s, Batalvi does not even refer to Iqbal's supposed enthusiasm about a separate state for Muslims. And yet, paradoxically, Iqbal is hailed as a progenitor of the idea of Pakistan. It should, however, be stressed that this opinion was projected by the state much after it came into being. Zahid Chaudhry's historical reading of the text of Iqbal's Allahabad address of 1930 suggests something quite different from the common perception prevailing among the people of Pakistan. Chaudhry contends that it was Lala Lajpat Rai of Hindu fundamentalist organization Arya Samaj who propounded the scheme of India's partition in 1926 so that peace and tranquility could be ensured in the region. Even Pakistani historian Tahir Kamran in his very important book by the title of The Making of Pakistan, or History of the Idea of Pakistan, that's a voluminous book, in which he also gives a detail of how the evolution of this idea of separate state for the Muslims, and it was brought to the fore, and its genesis has been discussed in detail by Tahir Kamran also. So Chaudhry substantiates his contention by reproducing a letter of Iqbal written to Edward John Thompson, a professor at University of Oxford, in the 5th volume of his voluminous Pakistan ki Siyasi Tarikh, or political history of Pakistan. Iqbal in this letter, dated March 4th, 1934, clearly stated, "You call me a protagonist of the scheme called Pakistan. Now Pakistan is not my scheme. The one that I suggested in my address is the creation of a Muslim province, a province having an overwhelming population of Muslims in the northwest of India. This new province will be, according to my scheme, a part of the proposed Indian Federation." This is the same point that Iqbal had advanced in his thought-provoking Allahabad address, in which he stated that address was delivered in 1930. The units of Indian society are not territorial as in European countries. India is a continent of human groups belonging to different races, speaking different languages and professing different religions. Their behavior is not at all determined by a common race consciousness. Even the Hindus do not form a homogeneous group. The principle of European democracy cannot be applied to India without recognizing the fact of the communal groups. The Muslim demand for the creation of Muslim India within India is therefore perfectly justified. On the other hand, Iqbal's oft-quoted statement, which has found a permanent place in the textbooks of history, political science, and specifically Pakistan studies, reads as follows. "I would like to see the Punjab Northwest Frontier Province, that is now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh and Balochistan amalgamated into a single state." Interestingly, this quote from Iqbal's Allahabad address of 1930 only became an integral part of Pakistani public and educational discourse after the debacle of East Pakistan in 1971. Iqbal's projection as the progenitor of the idea of a separate state for Indian Muslims received wider currency only subsequent to the East Pakistan tragedy, because he precluded Bengal from his scheme for the proposed territorial readjustment in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent. Famous Pakistani historian K.T. Aziz holds a similar opinion. His proposal was confined to the northwest of India. There is no warrant at all for saying that in 1930 he wanted a Muslim state embracing all Muslim provinces or Muslim majority areas. In his book, A History of the Idea of Pakistan, Aziz refers quite explicitly to Iqbal's proposal, which envisaged Pakistan and WFP, Sindh and Balochistan to be merged into a larger province within the proposed Indian Federation. Aziz quotes Iqbal's letter addressed to the Times, dated October 12, 1931, to corroborate this point, which is also reinforced by Iqbal's letter to Raghib Hassan, dated July 29, 1937. K.K. Aziz makes another point worth mentioning, thereby dismissing the following three false claims. Iqbal was the first person to propose a division of India on religious lines. Iqbal was the first person to do so from a political platform. And third, Iqbal was the first Muslim to have proposed the division of India. He then goes on to set the record straight by providing correct factual information. First, according to K.K. Aziz, exactly 64 suggestions, vague or definite, to divide India were made between June 24th, 1858, June 24th, 1858 and December 31st, 1929. Nawab Zulfikar Ali Khan. Number two, Nawab Zulfikar Ali Khan demanded a separate country for the Muslims in the northwest and northeast of India in his address as chairman of the Resection Committee delivered at All India Khilafat Conference session held in Lahore on 31st of December 1929. Number three, Aziz reveals that 28 Muslims had put forward such proposals before Iqbal spelled it out in his Allahabad address in December 1930. Furthermore, it is most paradoxical that although Iqbal's political role was constructed no earlier than the mid-1970s, the status of Pakistan's national poet, however, was accorded to him immediately after the creation of Pakistan. Iqbal's emphasis on Islam, that's a very crucial and very important point, and that needs very incisive and profound deliberation. In the same speech which he made at Allahabad, Iqbal distinguished Islam from Christianity as it was being practiced in modern secular Europe, where religion was treated as an individual's private affair. Christianity had therefore ceased to address any issue concerned with what Iqbal called man's temporal life. Islam, on the other hand, according to him, did not divide the unity of man into an irreconcilable duality of spirit and matter. While developing further this point of immense importance, Iqbal stated, to Islam, matter is spirit, realizing itself in space and time. While stating this, Iqbal seems to have simulated Hegel's idealism, wherein the material world is merely the articulation of the absolute idea that is unfolding itself. Hence, he saw the moving and juvenile spirit of Islam through the prism of Hegelian idealism, which subsequently formed the essential mold for his revivalist thought. From here, one may proceed to elucidate Iqbal's dynamism which, according to his reading of Islamic culture, inhered in its essence, thus making it subject to evolution. SM Ikram also alludes to this aspect in Iqbal by stating, his was a vigorous mind, untrammeled by convention and facing forward rather than backwards. Ikram refers to a fundamental fact that had not been taken into account by many of his so-called admirers, which was his conception of Islam as dynamic rather than static. Iqbal claimed quite decisively it would not be Islam if the truths it enunciated were not living enough to be capable of adjustment to varying circumstances. However, this gives rise to a conundrum, particularly when Iqbal's contention regarding Islam as a religion in a state of evolution is scrutinized from a different point of view. One can contend that an ideology passing through stages of evolution is moving towards this final stage of completion, which implies that the ideology is yet to evolve to the full and therefore is incomplete. In other words, the ideology has not yet reached its final ideal stage where it may realize its optimum potentiality. That stage obviously lying in the future. In this analogy, if this analogy is contingent, then Islam as an ideology that has a capacity to evolve comes under the operational purview of serial time. Thereby, time with change as its essential trait is bound to bring about a mutation in the contents as well as in the superstructure of Islam. In the light of this analogy, the universality of Islam's message and the claim ascribed to it as a complete code of life does not seem to stand the test of scrutiny. If delved in deeper, other more far-reaching implications present themselves. Sources of Islamic knowledge, namely the Quran and Hadith, are meant to guide humans existing within temporal and spatial domains. Therefore, in order to make the message of the Quran and Hadith comprehensible and also practicable for humans, it will have to correspond to the exigencies of time and space, and thus be divested of the much ascribed essence of universalism, which is central to the belief system of an overwhelming majority of practicing Muslims across the world. Another inference that can be drawn after regarding closely the impact of time as an agent of change on Islam is the contested status of the Prophet's life, or Uswa Hasana, the perfect model for imitation, as a prototype for posterity to emulate. Yet another point that begs consideration is concerned with the dichotomy between ideology and civilization, with particular reference to their respective locales. Islam as an ideology has Hijaz, or the Muslim holy places in Saudi Arabia, as its point of origin, and even its claim to universality cannot deny Islam its cultural peculiarity, which is essentially Arabic. Additionally, it has a Semitic character, which it has in common with Judaism and Christianity. However, Islam, monolithic and monotheistic at its core, when pervading the polytheistic and culturally plural terrain of South Asia, was not able to hold its own. The influences it was exposed to in South Asia not only changed its form but also renegotiated its stance vis-a-vis monotheism. Hence, Tasawwuf, and particularly Wahdat al-Wujud, brought much needed medievality to Islam and its compatibility with the Vedantic mystic traditions of India by espousing ideas of universal love for all, regardless of faith and race. Thus, Islam at the popular level, with saints and shrines acquiring a central position in its belief system, adjusted to the dictates of the religiously plural and ethnically diverse society. Ironically, Iqbal did not take up that complex and rather ambivalent issue which had brought about a sweeping transformation of Islam while it was in a process of carving out a permanent niche for itself in a culturally divergent setting. Iqbal ruled out with a tint of disdain any impact of tasawwuf on Muslims and considered it one of the main causes of their decline. However, tasawwuf, quite ironically, formed an integral part of his own reconstructed religious thought. The point, therefore, is that while talking from the Indian vantage point, he alluded to the general rather than the particular. Some critics look askance at the metaphors and similes employed by Iqbal in his Urdu poetry, which had no congruence whatsoever with the South Asian context. Metaphoric allusions like Shaheen, Sahra reflect quite vividly that he invoked poetic themes and inspirations that excluded any South Asian reference. In other words, Iqbal apparently fell short of accommodating the cultural and social diversity that shapes a distinct South Asian Muslim identity. Iqbal's Urdu poetry is replete with nostalgia for the golden past, when Muslims had reached the height of political and civilizational glory. Shamshir-o-Sana, sword in the spear, to him would serve as a modus vivendi for Muslims to regain their lost position of supremacy. Such a simplistic prognosis is confined only to his Urdu poetry, which has sufficient potential in it to instill necessary religious zeal required for religious activism, which could subsequently lead to militancy. Honorific appellations such as Mard-e-Mu'min, the true Muslim, was employed to highlight the strength of Superman's ultra-powerful will, capable of transforming not only the destiny of human multitudes, but also of altering the course of history. However, the notion of Mard-e-Mu'min that has gained currency in the educational discourse of Pakistan connotes something absolutely different, namely that the individual is the agency of historical change, an interpretation that has unfortunately mostly been used to legitimize autocratic rule in Pakistan, obviously at the expense of democracy. In the 1980s, General Ziaul assumed the title of Mard-e-Mu'min, Mard-e-Haq, the true Muslim and the man of truth, which suited perfectly his objective of self-perpetuation as the ruler of Pakistan. Today, certain individuals have started branding Taliban as a replica of Iqbal's Mard-e-Mu'min. Hence, the people drawing inspiration from Iqbal's thoughts as expressed in his poetry are mostly fundamentalists, which of course is the most unfortunate. Thank you very much. Hope this is not this is not very dense, and hope I have conveyed some sense into the thought and the life of Iqbal. Iqbal remains one of the greatest Muslim thinkers of the 20th century, and we must not have any doubt whatsoever in his grandeur as a thinking mind. Having said that, you know, one has this, I think, tendency to disagree with leading lights of Muslim thought in order to create or in order to set this course of evolution forward. So we will have another session. Hopefully, the power outage and the problem with our Skype and video conferencing will be over very shortly, and we can discuss any ambiguities or any ambivalences that we find in this lecture. Thank you.